Okay, guys, you can start.
Okay, good morning to our lecturer, Mr. Bisoon, and to our colleagues. This morning, our group will be presenting on courage and moral leadership. Our team members are Randy Sukdeo, Shivan Sanka, and myself, Vanessa Duncan. Now, the overview of this chapter, according to Daft textbook, we should be able at the end of this lesson to combine a rational approach to leadership with a concern for people and ethics. We should be able to recognize our own stage of moral development and ways to accelerate that moral maturation. We should know and use mechanisms that enhance an ethical organizational culture, apply the principles of stewardship and servant leadership, recognize courage in others, and unlock our own potential to live and act courageously. Now, before we begin, just as we would have done a couple of weeks ago, I would like us to use an analogy to better understand the lesson today. And we are looking at leadership as a human body made up of mind, heart, and spirit. And we want to look at the development of moral leadership and courage as the spirit of leadership. Now, not spirit in the sense of spirituality, but the ability to look within, to contemplate the human condition, to think about right and wrong, and to stand up for what is right and wrong. And to do this, we will be addressing this chapter in three parts: in moral leadership and ethical leadership, which explains the behavior that contributes to unethical practices, how leaders can act in a moral way, and we will examine a model of personal moral development. Then we'll go on to stewardship and servant leadership. We'll go on to courage, explore what courage means and how leaders develop the courage for moral leadership to flourish. We will review some short videos as well and have some brief discussions on the reality of the issues presented. So we welcome your participation. So let's jump in. Now, can anyone give me at least two characteristics of a moral leader or moral leadership? This is an open question to the class. Can anyone give me two characteristics of a moral leader? You could just go ahead and talk because I can't see the hands raised based on how I have the...
Integrity.
Yes, that is a big one. Anyone else?
Compassion.
Compassion, yes. Anyone else?
Respect. Respect.
Yes.
Honesty.
Big one. Honesty, yeah.
Self-discipline.
Say again?
Self-discipline.
Self-discipline, correct.
High standard.
Thank you for your feedback. Now, I have just a list that I would have researched, and it said that they are driven by values, self-service, decision-making. They have high personal values. They guide themselves by values and ethics, and they have the ability to build trust in others. Now, according to Daft, moral leadership is about distinguishing right from wrong and doing right, or doing right from wrong, sorry, and seeking the just, the honest, the good, and the right in the right conduct in its practice. Now, another definition from Dov Seidman, the founder of the CEO of the Howe Institute for the Society, once said, above all, moral leadership is about how leaders touch hearts, not just minds, how they enlist others in a shared and significant endeavor, and create the conditions where everyone can contribute their character and creativity. And we are aware of some of the outstanding moral leaders that we would have experienced over the years, like Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa and We know a few, and we can really attest that this is some of the characteristics or some of the things that they have really shared with us. Now, studying this chapter, a question popped in my head, and I'd like to know what you all think. Do you think it's easier to be a moral leader when it's non-profit, or when there
I
is no
presented last.
financial?
Duncan presented first, then Sukhdev and me.
Hello? You're hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Right.
There was a bit of a disruption.
Yes, we're hearing
but
you.
We're hearing you.
Sorry. Okay. So I was asking, a question popped into my head, and I wanted to know, do you all think that it's easier to be a moral leader when it does not include financial gains? Anyone have any feedback on that? Or is it okay to be, is it just naturally in someone to be a moral leader, whether it deals with financial or non-profit?
I think it comes down to the person itself and the individual itself, regardless of what type of organization they're operating from.
All right, I agree. Now, what's disheartening is that moral leadership is very scarce today. And whether it be in business, politics, even our work environment, with leaders not even portraying half of these fundamental moral values that we would have just discussed or just given examples of before. And the consequences of immoral leadership and unethical practices, it results in unethical leadership. Now, what is ethical leadership? Ethics, we'll try to go to the root of the word ethical, and ethics are moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. And to put that into the statement itself or the definition itself, it says that ethical leadership is the art of leading people and making good decisions based on a defined set of values, such as fairness, accountability, trust, honesty, equality, and respect. In fact, these values form the core foundation of ethical leadership. And I don't know if you all could see the connection between moral leadership and ethical leadership. They undergird each other. They are like two sides of a coin. So they work together hand in hand. Now, let's look at a video and we'll discuss it after.
The Volkswagen emissions scandal just got worse for the automaker on Tuesday. It said up to 11 million vehicles worldwide could be affected by software used to cheat emissions tests. As the German automaker continues to delve deeper into crisis, here's what we know so far. Number one, what is the scandal?
According to the EPA, Volkswagen has admitted that it has installed software on a controller in the car that regulates emissions from the tailpipe. And this software allows the car to turn on the emissions suppression when the car is being tested in the laboratory, but then turns it off when the car is out on the road.
The company issued a sweeping apology for breaching consumer trust over the weekend, but hasn't publicly admitted to manipulating test results. Chief Executive Martin Winterkorn has also issued a personal apology. Number two, the cars affected. Initially, the allegations concerned at least 480,000 Volkswagen diesel cars made since 2008. The Jetta, Beetle, Golf and Passat, and the Audi A3. But that is likely to change with the scandal now widening to 11 million cars.
And that could now include other models that have not yet been identified, such as the Skoda or Seat cars, which also are based on the same platform as the Passat.
Number three, the story in numbers. VW shares plunged as much as 20% on Monday in the wake of allegations. It fell another 23% on Tuesday morning. VW plans to take a $7.25 billion provision that will undoubtedly force the company to downgrade its earnings outlook. And the German automaker could face as much as $18 billion in fines for allegedly manipulating exhaust emissions tests. Number 4, the U.S. Department of Justice has launched an investigation, said people familiar with the matter. The U.S. House Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee on Monday said it planned to hold a hearing in coming weeks. Meanwhile, lawyers filed a lawsuit seeking class action status against VW in a federal court in California that accused the company of fraudulent concealment, false advertising, and violating consumer rights. Number 5, for Volkswagen, it's a rocky road ahead.
After the US made its announcement on Friday, now it looks like the European Union is going to launch its own investigation. The Commission has called for a meeting of national regulators from around Europe to discuss Volkswagen and whether there should be an investigation of the entire auto industry to see if their emissions levels are also realistic.
Volkswagen's supervisory board, which oversees the company, will meet on Friday to discuss the emissions scandal, a person familiar with the situation said.
Now, what do y'all think about that video? Isn't it amazing how leaders can be unethical in their practices?
Very unethical.
Say again?
Very unethical.
Very unethical, because it's amazing that the kind of, I don't want to say balls, but the testicular fortitude some of these companies have. And we see here that ethical lapses are blatant, or blatant disregard for ethical practices. It trickles down to organizations, employees, stakeholders, societies, and in this case, the environment. And we wonder if these people, would have gone through classes or studies to have the basic understanding of moral and ethical leadership. So that's one example. One of the examples that's really close to home as well, is this guy here, Mr. Duke. And we remember Mr. Duke and Kiesel Jackson scandal. Anybody have any comments on this? I just want to say thanks, Livewire, for your reference. No, nobody has any feedback on that? All right, well, what Daft did, however, is that he would have now given us a table that lists unethical leadership and ethical leadership. So he's saying that unethical leaders, they are arrogant and self-serving. Yes, Rona?
Oh, Vanessa, could you just go back and probably just explain in terms of, yeah, I didn't read it. So in terms, could you just simply explain in terms of this issue with the scandal? And with reference to your presentation?
No problem.
Thanks.
So this slide here, I placed it because it's an example of a form of ethical and moral leadership. Now, with ethical leaders, it's not only or being an ethical leader or portraying moral leadership, it doesn't exempt you entirely, because the people that follow you you are leading by example, and they who follow you see your life in its totality. So this, with any other normal human being, this would have been not a scandal, it would have just been a personal dispute. But this now being somebody of such high, that represents a group as a leader, knowing that this would have burst into the public now, how is he now viewed? You understand? So it just shows that being a leader and having ethical and moral leadership, it flows straight through your entire life. not only what you present to the public or what you present to your staff, but it's about leading by example. You understand that, Rona?
Well, yes, in terms of the what's new scandal, yes.
Yes. So I just took it as a example for us to just kind of relate, because the book has a lot of international examples. I showed one with Volkswagen and they being unethical in their practices that would have really affected their staff members, their company, their stocks, and more so the environment because of their unethical practices. But when it comes to Mr. Duke and his scandal, it affected his followers, or at least some of them, you could say, because some people may not have been faced by it, but it shows that being a leader is not only about what you do outwardly and what people see, but what people don't see as well. Yeah. So moving on, in Daft explained two listings or some examples of an unethical leader and the ethical leader. And he said that the unethical leader is arrogant and self-serving, excessively promotes self-interest, practices deception, breaches agreements, deals unfairly, shifts blame to others. The leader, it diminishes others' dignity, neglects follower development, withholds help and support, lacks courage to confront unjust acts. And the ethical leader possesses humility, it maintains concern for the greater good, is honest and straightforward, fulfills commitments, strives for fairness, takes responsibility, shows respect for each individual, encourages and develops others, and serve others, and shows courage to stand up for what is right. Now, reading through these differences of unethical and ethical leadership, it leads to wonder, where do some leaders go wrong? And besides the main influence being greed and power, can anyone think of reasons leaders can be influenced to forsake their moral principle? Besides money, and which kind of amounts to greed or more power, anyone has any ideas as to other reasons why a moral leader might move from the moral path?
To probably cover up some kind of mistake or something that they may have made, some error they have made, to try and cover up that.
Yeah. Sometimes like fraud, or even like if we use the example like Mr. Duke. Now he may have erred, but what if somebody had this information and they blackmailed him and told him, well, if you don't give us this amount of money, we will send it out to the public. So that's a good example, Ryan. Anybody else have any ideas or examples or thoughts?
Could you say the question again, please, if you don't mind?
No, they're saying like what makes a moral or ethical leader become unethical? We know that there are a lot of leaders who would have started off with the best intentions, with ethics and morals, but somehow they would have strayed. You have any other example?
I think that's one of the oldest thing that has faced humanity, and it's temptation. I guess temptation to greed, or sometimes they might be approached by someone who wants to get something done in a particular way without using the right approach or the legal or the lawful approach, and they may go into it because it's beneficial. It might benefit them in some way. Most times it'll be financial. So
yeah, and that's true.
Yeah, that's what takes people off the path.
And I believe as well that sometimes it isn't that they intentionally do it. Sometimes it's a mistake, and it's when they do realize what the whole scenario, it's too late to pull back, and they feel like better just go forward, and one thing leads to the next. Yeah, so thank you guys for that. So now, according to Daft, he said that there are ways that people can act moral. So if you want to how to learn to act moral, or you can use these 10 points here. So he's saying that you could develop, articulate, and uphold high moral principles. You could focus on what is right for the organization as well as the people involved. Set the example you want others to live by. Be honest with yourself and others. Drive out fear and eliminate the undiscussables. Establish and communicate ethics, policies, develop a backbone, show zero tolerance for ethical violations, reward ethical conduct, treat everyone with fairness, dignity, and respect from the lowest to the highest level of the organization, and do the right thing in both your private and professional life, even if no one is looking, which we know as integrity. Yes, Ms. Waldron?
So, Vanessa, so what is your view on the fact that you don't be a person said that persons cannot you have to be born moral or born with ethical values. You can't be taught or act like a moral leader. It could be that you're pretending to be what you're not. What is your views on that? Please, thanks.
Well, interestingly enough, the slides to follow kind of presents my view, because yes, some people really don't have moral values based on their probably how they were brought up, because sometimes you learn from others, and if it is in an environment where unethical practices seem right to you, obviously it wouldn't be moral. Or it might be moral to you, but it might be moral to others. So I believe what Daft was trying to do is tell you firstly what a moral leader should look like. And thereafter, he goes on to tell you how to develop moral character or moral leadership. Now, I hope I answered your question, but based on where I'm going from the slides after, you will see that I agree with what he would have said later on in the slide. So I'll continue, right? And if I still didn't answer the question, you could ask me again, okay?
Okay, thanks, no problem.
Right. So now he's saying now now that we have reviewed the template presented by Daft, the question is, how do we become a moral leader? And when can it be said that we are moral leaders? Now, yes, leaders have great influence over others, but there's a difference when it's moral leadership. It gives life to others, and so too enhances the quality of life. Immoral leadership does the opposite. It takes away and enhances the life of the leader itself, and leaders are responsible for building the foundation that strengthens and enriches the lives of its organization members. Now, moral development as a leader doesn't come overnight. It takes a lot of hard work and developing one's character. And Daft is saying that a leader's capacity to make moral choices is related to the individual's level of moral development. Now, this model, what Daft did is he presented a table of 3 steps of moral development. And he referred it to, I don't know if I pronounce the guy's name properly, Kohlberg. And Kohlberg formulated a theory asserting that individuals progress through 6 distinct stages of moral reasoning from infancy to adulthood. And he grouped these stages into 3 broad categories of moral reasoning, namely pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And each level is associated with increasingly complex stages of moral development. So based on this diagram here, the 6 distinct stages that Kohlberg would have referred to was avoiding punishment, self-interest, good boy attitude, law and order morality, social contract, and principles. And the 3 stages that it would have been broken up to is the pre-conventional moral reasoning based on reward and punishment. And then you have the conventional moral reasoning based on internal ethics. And then you have post-conventional, which is adulthood, moral reasoning based on personal ethics. Now, based on Daft's table, he would, as I said, he referenced Kohlberg's theory, and he kind of placed it into the framework of leadership. And he's saying that initially, as you build, as you develop as a moral leader, or you have personal moral development, your first stage or your first level is the pre-conventional, and you follow rules to avoid punishment. You act in one interest, and you build blind obedience to authority for its own sake. So just to explain, he's saying that you now start anything and you don't really know what's going on. So you're just going to follow rules to avoid any punishment. You're going to act in your own interests. You know, you're not, once they say is this, you're not really concerned of whether or not it affects anybody else, or once they say is this. And as they say, blind obedience to authority for its own sake. So as I said, it could be affecting everybody else. It could be affecting you. Or as a matter of fact, you may not even know what is the repercussions of the information or instruction you got from the leader, but you'll just do it anyway. And that's the first stage. The second stage, you live up to expectations of others, fulfills duties and obligations of social systems, and you uphold laws. Now, this can go both ways. And according to Daft, he said people at this level may even disobey rules or laws that violate these principles or their principles of right and wrong. But it's also based on your environment. So as I was saying before, at this level, if you are taught the correct thing, you will uphold these laws that you have been taught. If you do the wrong thing, well, if you're taught the wrong thing, did I say the wrong thing, Chris? Well, let's say you taught the right thing, you uphold that. If you were taught the wrong thing, you uphold that as well. So there is where it goes into the level 3, and where you would have already now developed your internal principles or your internal moral principles. And it says you follow and you internalize universal principles of justice and right. It balances concerns for self with concern for others and the common good, and it acts in an independent and ethical manner regardless of the expectations of others. So you would have now gone through 3 stages where you would have just obeyed because you don't know. And then as you grow as a leader, you realize, well, that's not right, because I'm seeing probably the effects of the behaviors that I'm being taught. Or it could be that you are seeing the right thing and you're saying, yes, these are positive effects of what is being taught. And this will now carry you through to your 3rd stage, where you will now internalize for yourself what you believe is right and wrong based on what you would have been taught. And you will now have the courage to go against it. You will act morally towards others, and you'll be concerned about their well-being. So that's the 3 stages that Daft would have elaborated on or given as an example for moral development. Now, according to Daft, research has been consistent, and it has found a direct relationship between higher levels of moral development and more ethical behaviors on the job, including less cheating, a tendency towards helpfulness to others, and the reporting of unethical or illegal acts known as whistleblowing. Leaders can use an understanding of these stages to enhance their own and followers' moral development and to initiate ethics training programs to move people to higher levels of moral reasoning. When leaders operate at level 3 of moral development, they focus on higher principles and encourage others to think for themselves and expand their understanding of moral issues. So, in summation, moral leadership and ethics go hand in hand, and there are ways to develop, there are ways to act like a moral leader, which can also help you develop internally how you become a moral leader. And moral leaders generally have an impact on those that follow them. They're mostly positive. And this can be seen, as I said, by a lot of other examples, like Nelson Mandela and Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, many. So this brings me to the end of my part of the presentation. Does anyone have any questions? And Bruni, did I answer your question? Oh? You're hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Right.
If we're not going to answer, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. I hope I can answer.
Yeah, this is, well, it basically for the entire class, right? Well, I heard you talk about leadership and moral leadership. I want to ask you a question. I want to ask the class a question in the sphere of politics. There was a political leader who stated that politics has a morality of its own. And I want to throw to the class, if they believe that is true and to what extent it is true, and if politicians deserve a moral pass in the standard of morality in which we hold them to.
Well, I think that there is something that undergirds all moral principles. There has to be something that you follow. There must be some right and wrong in it. And most of the time, well, morality is on the welfare and the betterment of everyone else. So political morals should be undergirded by good moral standards. So it's not, I don't think it's a morality in its own. That is just my perception of it. I see Bruni had her hand up. You could go ahead, Bruni.
Yes, sorry, I know you called me, but I stepped away for a moment.
That's okay.
Yeah. What was the question, if you don't mind?
No, well, Peter just posed a question to the class, and he asked if you believe that he said that he heard a political leader once say that politics have a moral of its own. And after discussing moral leadership and ethical leadership, can we hold any truth to that? Does political morals have its own standard? Or is it, I said it's undergirded by some form of personal morality to begin with. So I don't know if you want to jump in and add on.
No, that's okay.
Right? Okay, so guys, this is the end of my presentation. I will now hand you over to Randy, who will now go on to servant leadership. Randy?
Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Okay.
So I will be covering the topics of servantship and servant leadership. So we would have seen where Vanessa would have covered moral and ethical leadership. And as we ponder upon it, it covers you as a person, your character. But now we're going to see two leadership styles that reflects on how moral and ethical leaders interact with their followers. So as we go along. All right, so we will first look at where does stewardship and servant leadership position themselves as it relates to control. All right, we would see here in this table taken from Daft that traditional leaders, the authoritarian leaders, would be more where the followers would be more obedient subordinates. Participative, which was introduced around 1980, more started to include motivating of followers and allowing them some type of say within the organization. And then there is stewardship, which focuses on empowerment, and servant leadership, which focuses on service. All right, so what is stewardship? Stewardship is a pivotal shift in leadership thinking. Followers are empowered to make decisions, and they have control over how they do their own jobs. Leaders gives followers the power to influence goals, systems, and structures, and become leaders themselves. Stewardship supports the belief that leaders are deeply accountable to others as well as the organization, without really trying to control others. All right, to define meaning and purpose for others or take care of others. In fact, stewardship has been called an alternative to leadership because the spotlight is on the people actually doing the work, making the product, providing the service, or working directly with the customers. We will then look at the principles of stewardship. So there are 4 principles, according to Daft, that provide a framework for stewardship. First principle is reorient toward a partnership assumption. So partnership can happen only when power and control shift away from formal leaders to core workers. Partners have the right to say no to one another. And here we would see where the morality and ethical standard would come in. All right, they are totally honest with one another, neither hiding information nor protecting the other from bad news. In addition, partners, when we say partners, we are saying leaders and followers are jointly responsible for defining vision, purpose, and jointly accountable for outcomes. So if something negative happens, it's not that you're going to throw your follower under the bus, especially when both of you all, were, how to put it, we made a decision together. All right, the second principle, localize decisions and power to those closest to the work and the customer. Decision-making power and the authority to act should reside right at the point where the work gets done. This means reintegrating the managing and doing of the work so that everyone is doing some of the core work of the organization part of the time. Nobody gets paid simply to plan and manage. And I guess that is what we would see from the traditional leadership approach. The third, recognize and reward the value of labor. The reward systems tie everyone's fortunes to the success of the enterprise. Stewardship involves redistributing wealth by designing compensation so that core workers can make significant gains when they make exceptional contributions. Everyone earns his or her pay by delivering real value, and the organization pays everyone as much as possible. So we see something here like fair share. All right, the fourth principle, expect core work teams to build the organization. So teams of workers who make up the core of the organization or division define goals, they maintain controls, they create a nurturing environment, and organize and reorganize themselves to respond to changing environments and the marketplace they serve. You could see that as innovation. Some well-known examples of stewardship leaders would include, if we look at the corporate world, Ginny Rometty, an ex-CEO of IBM. If we look at the more humanistic, Mother Teresa, religious-related, Jesus Christ. And if we look around, a lot of religious leaders tend to embrace strong stewardship principles. So we now move along to servant leadership. All right, and we have a video. Just take it in, relax.
Hey guys!
All right, sorry about that. Just be patient with us.
Hey guys, and welcome to What's Making You Blue with Cheeto and Gary. Hey Gary.
Hi, Cheeto.
So, what's making you blue?
Would you like to know what's making me blue, Cheeto?
Yes.
Well, every time I walk into the kitchen, the mountain of dishes seems to get higher. Looks like we have Mount Kilimanjaro in the middle of the sink.
Oh.
Nobody does their dishes in this house.
Well, I know what can help with that.
Oh, I'm sure you do, Cheeto.
A little bit of servant leadership.
Ah, servant leadership. Okay, so when I serve you your dinner, you can be a leader and do your dishes?
Well, yes, but you can also be a leader by serving others and showing them the way. And when you lead, people will follow.
By showing them the way. So you want me to do all the dishes in order for you guys to be able to learn how to do the dishes?
That's right. You serve others and show them the way to do what is right. Boys and girls, you can be a servant leader every day too. So remember, whenever you're blue, we're here for you.
So wait, you're telling me in all these years, you've never once learned how to do your dishes? Unbelievable.
Thank you for that. All right, so here we saw a very, very, very practical approach to servant leadership. As much as Mr. Harry Blue there was a bit perturbed, I want to call him Picky Head. Picky Head was very practical and straight when it comes to servant leadership. In the most menial task, servant leadership can be shown and practiced. So we would look at the definition of servant leadership. Servant leadership is a leadership philosophy that prioritizes serving the needs and well-being of others, such as team members, employees, and the community as the primary focus of leadership. Secondly, it stands in contrast to traditional leadership paradigms that emphasize power, control, and hierarchical authority. Servant leaders also aim to support, empower, and enable those they lead to reach their full potential. We would look at also the historical background of servant leadership. So servant leadership as a concept was popularized by Robert K. Greenleaf, an American management consultant in the 1970s. Servant leadership was first described by Greenleaf in his book, quote unquote, Servant Leadership. Greenleaf believed that many people had the capacity for servant leadership. He said the greatest enemy to organizations and to society is fuzzy thinking on the part of good, intelligent, vital people who have the potential to lead but do not lead, or who choose to follow are non-servants. Yeah? So Greenleaf had 4 principles. All right, and so the 4 basic principles in Greenleaf's servant leadership model include: put service before self-interest. Servant leaders make a conscious choice to use their gifts in the cause of change and growth for other individuals and for the organization. The desire to help others takes precedence over the desire to achieve a formal leadership position or to attain power and control over others. The servant leader calls for doing what is good and right for others, even if it does not really pay off financially. In this view, the organization exists as much to provide meaningful work to the person as the person exists to perform work for the organization. All right, the second principle: listen first to affirm others. So the leader doesn't have answers, he asks questions. One of the servant leader's greatest gifts to others is listening, as we would see, when we come to the characteristics. Fully understanding the problems others face and affirming his confidence in others. The leader tries to figure out the will of the group, and then further, however he can help. The leader does not impose his or her own will on others. By understanding others, the leader can contribute to the best course of action. Third one: inspire trust by being trustworthy. So servant leaders build trust by doing what they say they will do. So you have to be a person of your word. Being totally honest with others, giving up control, and focusing on the well-being of others. They share all information, these leaders, good and bad, and they make decisions to further the good of the group rather than their own interests. In addition, trust grows from trusting others to make their own decisions. And these leaders gain trust because they practically give everything away: power, control, rewards, information, and recognition. Trust allows others to flourish, and we need to remember that. All right, the last principle: it nourishes others and help them become whole. And that is one word. The word whole is, I would say, is the theme word for servant leadership. Servants leaders care about followers' spirits as well as their minds, just as Vanessa would have highlighted in moral leadership. Right? They believe in the unique potential of each person to have a positive impact on the world. So these leaders help others to find the power of the human spirit and accept their responsibilities. This requires an openness. So you must be open. You must be willing to share in pain and in difficulties of others. Being close to people also means leaders make themselves vulnerable to others and are willing to show their own pain and humanity. So it's total openness. All right, we would also look at the characteristics. So here we see 8 characteristics. And even as we go through them, I want you to think and ask yourself if you fall under these characteristics. All right. And I'll ask the class after if they think that they are in fact a servant leader. So servant leadership is characterized by these attributes and characteristics that more or less distinguishes itself from traditional leadership styles. We have listening, all right? Servant leaders, exceptional listeners. They seek to understand the concerns, ideas, and perspectives of their team members. By listening attentively, they create an environment of open communication and trust. Empathy. Empathy is at the core of servant leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, servant leaders are deeply attuned to the emotions and needs of their team members. They show genuine care and understanding, which fosters strong interpersonal connections. Healing, right? They strive to heal and support their team members. This includes addressing conflicts, providing emotional support, and helping individuals overcome personal and professional challenges. There's a lot on the part of the leader. Awareness. They have a high level of self-awareness, understanding their strengths, weaknesses, and the impact of their actions on others. So they are self-accountable, right? They also possess a keen awareness of the needs and dynamics within the team or the organization. Persuasion. Instead of relying on authority and coercion, servant leaders use persuasion and influence to guide their teams, right? They seek consensus and encourage team members to make informed decisions. Conceptualization, right? Servant leaders are what we would call visionaries. They have the ability to envision a better future for their organization and inspire others to work towards that vision. This quality helps guide the team in a purposeful direction. Foresight. Servant leaders demonstrate foresight by anticipating future challenges and opportunities. They make decisions based on long-term implications and act with the well-being of their team and obviously the organization in mind. Servant leaders are committed to the growth of people, and it is one of the primary goals of servant leadership. They actively support the personal and professional growth of their team members and, in helping them to reach their potential. So, at no point, as we covered servant leadership, was there ever a mention of a leader and a follower. There was always mention of the team, because that's exactly what the core group has now formed, a team, no longer a leader and a follower. So class, you could use the chat and you could tell me if you think you fall under the category of a servant leader. You could say yes, or you could say no. Or you could even say that you're not sure. All right. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I guess you're a bit indecisive. No problem. No problem at all. So as we move along, we look at two local leaders that I would consider as servant leaders in Trinidad. First one, Frank Porter. All right, Frank Porter was appointed as the 8th National Director of Youth for Christ, Trinidad and Tobago. The vision of this organization is to see the lives of every person in every region transformed through prayer and the word, and to become a part of the body of Jesus Christ. Due to his dedication, a wide range of social and in a wide range of social and community activities over the years, he was awarded the nation's Public Service Medal of Merit Gold. All right. He had a love for writing, and he wrote a lot of books that focused on parental development, youth development. All right. relate certain issues, emotional wellness, success at school, and many more. The second person is Wayne Chance, who is now deceased. And he founded in 1995 the organization that is called Vision on a Mission. All right, and he actually founded it within the Port of Spain prison during his incarceration. He was from the community of Arima. He was incarcerated at the tender age of 19, where he drew upon his strong spiritual beliefs, coupled with deep introspection, which acted as the catalyst for this overall transformation. All right, this transformation and his recognition of steadily increasing the population of young men within the prison system, resulting in the emergence of an organization that would assist ex-inmates on their release to re-enter society successfully. It is an organization dedicated to the rehabilitation and reintegration of ex-offenders. All right, we will look also how servant leadership, affects, how it is affected in the corporate world. So while servant leadership can be suitable in the corporate world, it is essential, sorry about that. It is essential to recognize that not all organizations may be immediately receptive to this leadership philosophy. Some corporate cultures may prioritize more traditional authoritative leadership styles. In such cases, a gradual transition and change management efforts may be needed to integrate servant leadership effectively. Ultimately, this leadership style in the corporate world depends on the company's values. So it boils back down to the morals and ethics of even the company, their values, their leadership culture, and its commitment to fostering a supportive and employee-centric environment. Many successful companies have embraced servant leadership principles to create a positive and thriving workplace. All right, and from here, I would like to turn over to Mr. Sankar, all right, as he will delve into courage. Thank you all.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I will take you all on this next part of the presentation on courage. In order to be a good leader, you must have courage, right? So we ask ourselves, what is leadership courage? It's a fundamental quality that all leaders must possess. The importance of courage in leadership suggests that it is a fundamental quality that all leaders must possess. Courage is practically essential when leaders face challenges that require them to uphold moral principles, even when doing so may result in ridicule or financial and emotional hardship. In some large organizations, the emphasis on promotion and pay raises sometimes overshadow the need for courageous leaders. However, courage remains essential, especially in these times of uncertainty. Courage can manifest in organizations and what its sources are in the context of leadership. Some examples of this could be the CEO taking a stance against unethical practices within the company, despite facing potential backlash from stakeholders. It could be, I call like the video with Volkswagen transparency, where a leader openly admits to a mistake that was made and outlines the step to correct it rather than trying to cover it up or shift the blame. This takes courage because it exposes vulnerability. Let's look at a video from Dr. Manny Scott, who's a American speaker, author, and educational consultant. He holds degrees in political science,
it's
Spanish,
your job,
and master's degree in educational leadership.
to be courageous. There are so many leaders that I meet who are afraid to hurt people's feelings, afraid to have crucial conversations, afraid to hold high standards because it might upset some people. So many leaders want to be liked by everybody. You are not in this position to be liked. You are in this position to lead. You're in this position to change the culture, to create a culture where stories like mine are possible. And if you do not change it, it's because you lacked the courage to stand up. All it takes is one. If you see mediocrity and toxicity around you and do nothing about it, you are responsible for perpetuating the mediocrity and the brokenness in our communities. And if you don't want to lead, get out of the way, because there's somebody else on fire ready to fight for those kids. Why not let it be you?
Excellent definition of leadership courage. Now let us look at what is courage. Courage is not just a moral virtue, but also a practical necessity for leaders. Courage plays a pivotal role in overcoming challenges such as deprivation, ridicule, and rejection. It enables leaders to balance risk-taking with ethical considerations, especially in the ever-changing landscape of today's organization. It allows them to experiment and innovate, even in the face of uncertainty. Courage does not mean that there's an absence of fear or doubt, Rather, the ability to act despite these feelings. There's a quote from US Senator John McCain stating that fear offers an opportunity for courage, not an indication of cowardice. Courage is indispensable precisely because fear and doubt exist. People experience a variety of fears, such as fear of death, failure, public ridicule, which can serve as a barrier to action. I will be honest, my fear is public speaking. I don't have that courage to stand up and face a crowd. Let's look at an example of Charles Darwin, who delayed publishing his groundbreaking work, Origin of Species, because of fear of public scorn. But as true leaders overcome not just innate fears, they also learn fears to assume responsibilities. And just to let you know, the Origin of Species is a groundbreaking work that introduced the theory of evolution through natural science, fundamentally altering our understanding of life on Earth. And he was afraid to publish that as soon as possible. He kept delaying until it was eventually published. We look at that slide from Winston Churchill. Courage is rightly esteemed the first human quality because it is the quality that guarantees all others. You need courage before you can do anything else. Our next great leader, courage leadership isn't fearless. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Nelson Mandela. What does courage mean? Courage means accepting responsibility. Leaders make a significant impact when they are courageous and take personal responsibility for the action. It contrasts two examples. Barbara John, a 16-year-old who took a stance against segregation, and Richard Flood, the CEO of Lehman Brothers, who failed to take responsibility for his action during the firm's collapse. While John exhibited courage and took risks that led to societal change, Flood avoided admitting mistakes even as Lehman Brothers was on the brink of disasters. Courageous leaders not only create opportunities for positive change, but also willingly accept responsibility for their failures. Some other courageous leaders or taking responsibility would have been Elizabeth Holmes, a former CEO of Theranos, failed to take responsibility for leading investors and regulators about the capabilities of our company's blood testing technology. A positive impact would have been Malala Yousafzai, who stood up for girls' education in Pakistan despite life-threatening risks. And she eventually became a global advocate for education and women's rights. The next one you all might know taking responsibility is Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, took responsibility for an incident where two black men were arrested in a Philadelphia Starbucks, closed the store for a day of bias training. He took responsibility. He had to have courage in order to do that. Courage often means nonconformity. Leadership courage involves challenging the status quo, taking risks for ethical reasons, and inspiring others to do the same. Some examples from the US military, which illustrate how unconventional methods can lead to positive change, even at the risk of danger. We could look at General David Petraeus and the Iraqi surge strategy. This was a positive change where he employed counterinsurgency tactics that was somewhat unconventional in the context of American military doctrine during the Iraqi war. His strategy shifted focus from defeating the enemy to protecting the population and winning hearts and minds, which led to a decrease of violence and improved the relationship between the US and Iraq. Our next controversial method would be Admiral William H. McRaven, reference special operations, where innovative tactics were used. He was known for spearheading the use of special operation forces in conventional warfare. His leadership and planning executed Operation Neptune Spear, which led to the killing of Osama bin Laden. Another one, high risk, would be the use of drones for surgical strikes, which is technological innovation, where they target killing of enemy combatants. Where this is unconventional method, but they minimize the risk of soldiers' lives, and it can be more precise than traditional methods where you have ground troops going to attack. But the thing about it, he was criticized for it because of the civilian casualty that arises from drone strikes. That will raise ethical and legal questions. And we move on to courage means pushing beyond the comfort zone. Taking a chance to improve things often requires leaders to push beyond their comfort zones, where they will encounter an internal wall of fear. It references a social experiment conducted 30 years ago by Dr. Stanley Milgram. The graduate students found it exceedingly difficult to ask someone for a seat on a crowded New York City subway. The experiment illustrates how even seemingly simple tasks can be challenging when they are pushed out of their comfort zone. The eternal wall of fear isn't exclusive to leaders, but affects anyone facing potential transformative choices, like asking someone out or confronting a boss. A local example of facing a wall of fear, we could use Dr. Wayne Kublal Singh. He faced his own internal wall of fear when he went on a hunger strike to protest a controversial highway project. His actions was risky and undoubtedly pushed him out of his comfort zone, yet it brought some attention to the issue. Next person is Afro Raymond, as a Tobago-based activist. He was pushed out of his comfort zone by actively blogging about and exposing corruption, facing considerable risk and resistance. So these people, they came out of their comfort zone. And to do that, you need to have courage. Courage means asking for what you want and saying what you think. Leaders speaking out to influence others and the challenges associated with it, specifically the desire to please others. We heard from Dr. Mani, you're not there to please people, you're not there to be liked by everybody. There was a psychologist who coined the term Albany paradox. This is a situation where people do not voice their true thoughts to maintain approval, even at the cost of collective misery. Courage in leadership involves speaking your mind, even when faced with potential disagreement or decision. It also involves setting boundaries and asking for what you want to achieve your vision. From one angle, the concept of the Albany paradox suggests that a lack of courage to speak can lead to poor decision. This can be applied not just in organizational settings, but also in social and family contexts. And on the other hand, speaking up requires a conducive environment where people feel safe to express their opinion. Leaders also have the responsibility to create such environment to encourage openness. People mustn't be afraid of you, the authoritarian way. Whatever I say goes. People have opinions that they could express or should be able to express. We move on to the next. Courage means fighting for what you believe in. Courage in leadership is not just about taking risks. It's about taking risks for a higher, often ethical purpose. Leaders like Kailash Satyarthi amplify this by fighting for causes that matters, even when personal risk is high. In contrast, leaders at Enron took significant risks, but did so for selfish and unethical reasons. Courageous leadership means taking meaningful risks that benefits the collective good rather than serving one's ego or causing harm to others. Example of this would be Trinidad and Tobago has seen instances where journalists put their careers and safety online to report stories of corruption, drug trafficking, or misuse of public funds. We can look at a more international scenario where a year ago where this reporter who was reporting on the Israel and Palestine conflict was killed. She had courage, putting her life in line on the line. And that's what she believed in. Because courage and leadership is about taking meaningful risks that strive to achieve a higher purpose, often in the face of personal danger, ridicule, or criticism. How does courage apply to moral leadership? There are many people working in organizations who have the courage to be unconventional, to do what they think is right, to dare to treat employees and customers as whole human beings who deserve respect, balancing off profit with people, self-interest with service, and control with stewardship requires individual moral courage. I look at a company, Anson McCall, one of the largest conglomerates in Trinidad and Tobago. They have been known to prioritize corporate social responsibility alongside its business objective. An international example would be former CEO Alan Mullery had the courage to mortgage all of Ford's asset for the car company for a loan to avoid bankruptcy and government bailout. A move that eventually paid off, but was at a high stake risk at the time. These leaders demonstrate the courage to stand up for what they believe is right, even when these actions are unconventional and may put them at risk for criticism or financial loss. Acting like a moral leader requires personal courage. Back, please. Let us start the previous slide. Yeah. Personal courage. Practicing moral leadership requires deep self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and courage. Leaders need to understand their strengths and weaknesses, adhere to their values, and often be willing to go against the grain. Relationship building is essential for moral leadership. It involves active listening, meaningful personal interaction, and vulnerability. Emotions play a vital role in connecting people and should be viewed as a source of strength. William Pace, General Manager of Westinghouse, he exemplified this when he personally communicated layoffs to his staff. Despite the painful experience, his moral approach earned him respect and increased performance within the remaining team. Ultimately, his methods allowed for the rehiring of some of the laid-off workers. Our next example is Nelson Mandela. His moral leadership in fighting against the apartheid in South Africa showcased his deep understanding of himself and his willingness to fight for the ethical treatment of all South Africans. He endured 27 years in prison, but emerged without bitterness, ready to lead the new democratic nation. Opposing unethical conduct requires courage. Whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is a high-stake form of courage. Whistleblowing is a high-stake form of courage that involves reporting illegal, unethical, or immoral practices within an organization. While legislation like the 2002 Oxley Act provides some protection for whistleblowers, the risks are still substantial, including job loss and workplace ostracization. There's an example, Colleen Rowley. She exposed the FBI shortcomings related to the September 11th attacks. And there was David Windhauser. He was fired from Train for exposing fraudulent financial reporting. All of these were victims of whistleblowing. As a risk comes with whistleblowing. But despite these risks, whistleblowers navigate complex emotions to do what they consider to be ethically right. The perception of whistleblowing is changing, with many companies now seeing it as beneficial. Companies like Marvin Windows and Doors even implement whistleblowing software to allow anonymous reporting. Finding personal courage. Leaders can find the courage to act despite fear and risk of pushing through their self-imposed limitation. Various leaders, various learned fears and social conditioning often discourage individuals from stepping out of their comfort zone or questioning their status quo. However, tapping into inner courage can be achieved through a commitment to meaningful causes, building strong interpersonal connection, accepting failure as an essential part of personal growth, and using anger constructively as a motivator. An example is Rosa Parks. She refused to give up her seat on a bus, catalyzing the civil rights movement. She was committed to the cause of equality and took a stand despite the potential for arrest or death. Believe in a higher purpose. Courage and leadership often stems from strong emotional commitment to a vision that transcends self-interest. Leaders like Eleanor Josatis and Lawrence Fish demonstrate that a higher purpose can enable individuals to confront fears and take risks. Josatis, who founded Focus, hoped face hate mail, bombing, and threat, but remained steadfast due to commitment to addressing civil rights issues in Detroit. Similarly, Fish, the CEO of Citizens Bank, champions community involvement and ethical operations along business success, acknowledging that merely making money is insufficient for long-term achievement. Drawing strength from others. Caring for others and receiving support from them are a significant source of courage for leaders in challenging situations. Emotional connection like love and mutual support act as catalysts for courageous actions. Caring for others and feeling supported encourage leaders to take risks that they otherwise might avoid. The mutual support and camaraderie among team members can help individuals keep going when facing significant challenges. Welcome failure. The concept of embracing failure as a learning opportunity is critical to fostering courage and resilience in leaders. Walt Disney's philosophy emphasizes that the value of failing early to build resilience, whereas Charlotte McCormick's story illustrates how failure and the lesson derived from it can increase courage and self-confidence. Embracing the risk of failure allows leaders to move beyond their comfort zone and build psychological fortitude. Leaders need to view failure not as a setback, but as an essential stepping stone for future success. Embracing failure, it builds resilience and courage, enabling leaders to take risks without being paralyzed by fear of failure. Many entrepreneurs consider early failures tuition fees for the lesson they learn. They argue that the insight gain are invaluable for future endeavors. Psychologists suggest that facing failure can result in post-traumatic growth, a phenomena where individuals can come out stronger and more resilient after adverse experiences. According to Walt Disney, the creator of Disney World and Mickey Mouse and all these things, it's important to have a good hard failure when you are young. Words of Walt Disney. Harnessing frustration and anger. Anger and frustration can be powerful motivators that drive people to act courageously, even in the face of fear or danger. Examples from both business and social activism show how negative emotion can be harnessed for positive change. Glenn McIntyre uses anger to start a consulting firm aimed at making hotels more accessible for the disabled, while Nahu Ridbadu in Nigeria was motivated by anger to fight fraud and corruption. In the organizational context, anger can propel action, such as firing an employee for just cause of confronting injustice. Anger can be a catalyzing force that enables individuals to act decisively, overcoming fears. The challenge lies in using anger constructively rather than destructively. McIntyre and Ridbadu are examples of individuals who have harnessed their anger for constructive change. From a psychological standpoint, Moderate levels of anger can indeed act as motivators for change. However, excessive or misplaced anger can be detrimental. An example in Martin Luther King, he channeled societal anger and frustration towards racial injustice into a peaceful civil rights movement. Managing anger before acting on anger, a moment of reflection can help ascertain the most constructive course of action. Consult others. Getting the perspective of a trusted colleague or a mentor can add context and potentially mitigate destructive forms of anger. Constructive expression, techniques like I statement can help express anger in a way that is less likely to escalate tension. Anger and frustration can be powerful tools for overcoming fear and acting courageously. But the key is to manage and direct these emotions in a way that leads to constructive and ethical outcomes. In conclusion, we have a video of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Ms. Mia Mottley, when she spoke at the United Nations Climate Change in 2021. And the group that presented today believes that this video encapsulates every aspect of what we learned from this chapter. It's a bit long, but worth the watch. A great example of what a leader should be.
All right, guys. So because we are pressed for time, we will leave the video in the slides, and we hope that you all will take a look at it when it's posted after our presentation ends. So in that regard, we just want to say thank you guys so much for listening. Are there any comments or questions? Oh, if there be none, this brings us to the end of our presentation, and we say thank you very much for your attention.